go. Yes, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Klyph Notes podcast, available everywhere you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, klyphnotes.com, like everywhere you get podcasts. Yo, so you heard me say this before, but this one is really unique and special to me to be able to have this conversation with this gentleman who I've known probably longer than I've been doing radio or podcasting or any of that. He is I've seen it written as a legendary MC when it comes to Portland hip hop. Ladies and gentlemen, Braille, what's up?
What's up, man? Yeah, bro, you're taking me back because I was thinking, before radio, I'm like, man, I for some reason I have these associations with something Pioneer Square, these different places where we would run into each other. But I'm like, yo, that's 20 years. Yeah.
So I moved to Portland in '94, and at the time was making music. Before I moved here, I was living in Louisiana.
Okay. Yeah.
So I came to Portland, had a couple of reels that I had recorded, was trying to figure out the scene and who to connect with and this, that, and the third. And I don't remember. I feel like maybe I met Mike first, who at the time was going by Soul Plasma, who now people know as Easy McCoy. And he invited me to, I feel like the first place that I went was an event at the park across from Lloyd Center.
Okay.
There was a gathering there, and I met you, and I met Omega Watts, and I learned about Acts 29.
Yeah.
Then I got invited to Acts 29, and I went to the building there, and that was sort of my introduction to you and the crew and the music, the art that you guys were making, and just became a fan, bro.
Yeah, bro. So that's 24 years ago for real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when I think about that and watching the journey, Acts 29, Lightheaded,
mm-hmm.
Beautiful Eulogy.
Yeah.
You have had a really full creative career. That really spans, hip hop is music.
Yeah.
You know, that literally spans decades. And again, bro, I've just been a fan of the way that you have created art, and the fact that now here in 2025 you are dropping brand new music.
Yeah.
Is dope.
Yeah.
It's really dope. But I just want to go back, bro, for a couple questions. Like, when I listen to the music that you have made, the music that you're making now, for you, where does your connection with not just music but specifically hip hop come from?
Yeah, the way I always say it is, the kind of kid I was, I'm a very one-track mind kind of person, mm-hmm. and so whatever I was into, that was the thing I was into, you know. So when I was into G.I. Joes, I was into G.I. Joes, you know. When I was into WWF, I was into WWF.
Yeah.
And so around middle school, sports was really my thing, but that started transitioning to music. And I had exposure to all kinds of music growing up. My dad had a lot of, 60s, 70s records, things like that. And I grew up with the MTV generation. So whether it was rock videos, hip hop videos. So you look at the early 90s, you had on the one hand the kind of grunge rock, Weezer, Green Day, Offspring. I had a little bit of attraction to that, but I didn't really play an instrument, anything. And then I also had an attraction to hip-hop, but I didn't really see how I would ever fit in it. And I ended up getting the album Midnight Marauders from Tribe Called Quest. And when I heard that album, and it seemed to me, okay, these are older dudes, because, at that time I would have been like 13 years old or something. They're older dudes, but they're just having fun. They're rhyming about life. And that, signaled to me, especially growing up in the West Coast, I kind of had an assumption that I needed to be tough, to be a rapper. And, you got the 5-foot assassin, Phife Dawg or whatever,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And that clicked for me. So that's when I started taking writing rhymes not as something I was trying to do, but a way to actually express myself. And once that started, like around age 14, it like I never looked back, you know. So I dabbled in it I mean, you know, I even got, you know, MC Hammer, you know, Crisscross era, you know, when I was like 8, 9 years old. But in terms of understanding the art form, and then what happened, the other part of the story I always tell is on the Midnight Marauders cover, you had all the faces of all these different artists. And so I had it on cassette tape. And then I started really going backwards. I was like, oh, Buster, oh, that was Leaders of the New School. Oh, that was that, you know. So I started really becoming a student of late 80s to early 90s, the stuff that kind of predated, and then just stayed with it, you know, moving forward. So, yeah, that was really what sparked my interest. And a big part of it, I think, even growing up in Portland, was like unlike any other genre of music, it seemed to transport me because I'm a very I visualize, you know, I'm much more of a visual learner, and it was like the lyrics would paint pictures for me in a way where, all right, I've never been to Queensbridge before, you know, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, but I'm starting to get a sense of it, you know, I'm starting to get a sense of it. And so that made the process of listening to albums, it was like getting a glimpse of somebody else's world, you know, and that it included their emotions, but a lot of other genres, I felt like I mainly was getting a tour of someone's emotions, but hip hop, because of there being more words, really gave me a picture of somebody's, like, what their day-to-day life might look like or might feel like. And that just resonated with me. Yeah.
It's so interesting for me to hear you say student, because when I listen to the art that you've created, being an old head and someone who has loved this genre for years, and someone who, you know, I started my life journey in the Northeast, so hip hop holds a very special place in my heart. And that's one of the things that for me has always come across in the music that you've made, is you seem as if someone who really studied this art form. And there are, for me, elements of rap music that I think, it's hard to say this without sounding critical of others, but I feel like there's elements of rap music, of good rap music, that you display. Diction, rhyme style, beat selection, just the artistry. Is that something that you focused on throughout your career?
Part of it, yeah. I mean, part of it for me, I'm very analytical, right? And so I would notice the difference between an album that had one good song, but the album wasn't great, or an album that felt all over the place, or the thing that's interesting within hip hop is, in the end, you got a beat and you've got a rhyme, right? Like if you're in a band or whatever, so often like the whole song is written together, but those two parts can be written completely separate.
Right.
This producer made a beat over here. He sends out a pack of tracks. This rapper picks it, and then he writes a song over here. And how a voice fits to a beat, how a concept fits to a beat, how all of that works together. I always found that fascinating. I'd be like, why are they talking about that on that record? You know, or, you know, one line that could just throw off the record to me, where I'm like, nah. And so now a lot of my studiousness, that really would have come from, like, mostly, I would say, starting around 93, 94 up to the 2000s, when, like, I spent like close to a decade where I was hyper focused on the student aspect. But then once I was in the practice of it, I think I became a student, like, learning as I go. Learning as I go. Like, I really liked that idea. I tried it. Why didn't it work? And then I would figure out why that didn't work, and then I would try it again. And some of, like, why I became so prolific was I wanted to keep trying. I wanted to keep learning
Yeah.
from like putting my hands to it. Because even more than being a visual learner, I'm really just like a learner from doing it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, the era of hip hop that I grew up in, there was no sense in which I'm gonna just come out and like sound like a Big Daddy Kane clone or even sound like a Tribe Called Quest clone. It was like I had to find my style, my voice, and that doesn't come from blocking everything out. It actually, I think, from having a broad exposure, you start learning to use your voice in new ways. You start learning different cadences, and it's like building tools, building a repertoire. And so it was like, for me, it was never just doing something because it was hot or because it was popular or here's like the trendy sound. It was more understanding the spectrum of what you can do, you know, what ways you can express yourself, and then figure out how can I add my own, you know, add my own twist to that. And so, yeah, I think that's just, I don't know, I'm a rule follower in one sense, like my personality. So I'm like, all right, I got to find my own take on this. But then I also want to stay within the grain, right? I want to be a part of what's come before me rather than like disregarding it and thinking, oh, there's nothing I can learn from that, right? So it's like having your fundamentals down. You know, you've got really skilled, you've got like the and one players who can do all the tricks, and then you've got like, how does the game of basketball work beyond just dribbling and dunking, right? And that's the way I've approached the music.
That's so dope, bro. Recently, we just finished a few days ago the completion of the 10-year celebration of PDX Hip Hop Week. And one of the things that happened during the week was there was a screening of a documentary called Beyond the Beat. And it was about a lot of the history of Portland hip hop. And the question was asked, that I'm paraphrasing, why isn't Portland hip hop more celebrated? And when names were shared and just a lot of the history was shared, it's really, really interesting for folk to even talk about. Portland has their own DJ Kool Herc. Portland has their own Grandmaster Flash. You know, some of the people that we celebrate. So I'm wondering, during that time for you, as you were coming up here in Portland, Oregon, did you have any sense of what was happening in Portland in terms of hip hop?
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad worked at the Benson Hotel, downtown Portland, and I would, starting, I don't know, probably freshman year of high school, I would go with him into work. And then, you know, downtown Portland was a different place. But while he was at work, I would just be roaming downtown. And really, I'd be going to all the record shops. So you know, because there's no streaming, there's no nothing, right? So I would do it as often as I could because that's how I would keep in the loop with the new music that came out. So I'd go to Second Avenue Records, I'd go to Music Millennium or Everyday Music. I mean, Music Millennium, that one shut down, that was down there. But and then Everyday Music, Platinum Records, you know, eventually would go to 360 Vinyl when that was, but that came later. But yeah, I would always be in the shops. And so I think the first, you know, Portland hip hop artist that actually had a CD, I had a Pete Miser CD, Who I Be. And what really inspired me about that was just like, oh, this is somebody from this area, because there was no mainstream representation of the Northwest. The closest thing eventually was Sir Mix-a-Lot coming out of Seattle, but I didn't really have there wasn't a music industry, right? Then there must have been, I mean, sometimes I have to jog my memory to remember, like I can see this poster, oh, the Po Hop and all of that. Yeah. Okay, I had to jog my memory a little bit. But I remember I would go to the Po Hop events, and so obviously I became acquainted with Misfit Massive, Lifesavers. I've got memories of this dude with his shell-toe Adidas on his hand scratching a record. And so I would always think like, yo, what if I could meet those Lifesavers dudes or whatever. Eventually we did meet and, you know, worked on some music. But I was a big fan of the Lifesavers, and then I started Seattle. There was a group, Source of Labor. I had them on tape. Sly the Brown Hornet. I had his cassette single. Obviously was aware of the music Cool Nuts was making, and then some of there was the compilation where there was a bunch of Portland artists, and so I would watch the Emerge MCs. I mean, I could go on.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the whole kind of gamut because I would go to, say, see Goody Mob, go to see De La Soul, and if there was a local opener, instead of being like, whatever, I'm just here to see that, I'd really pay attention because I'm like, this is somebody from where I live who's doing it. So that, I always found that really inspiring. But I think you're right. The representation, it was hard to break into the industry.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder if because of that, Portland artists, one of the things that maybe we've struggled to do is to be as prolific as we should be. Meaning, you could look at some of these artists and their catalog, and it's sparse. It's sparse. It took a lot of heavy lifting, especially we're going before. The era of the internet being, you're just sending files all over.
Yeah.
It was a lot of heavy lifting to bring an album to the finish line when you live in a city that doesn't really have a music industry. So for the people who were doing it, I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I've heard folk who have created their art here in Portland and have traveled elsewhere to have a similar sentiment that the do it yourself, the really grind that artists from Portland have had to do has been positively impactful when they travel outside of. They travel to other areas where they feel like, man, a lot of folks just take it for granted because it's almost like it's too easy for you. So it's interesting to hear the perspective of a creative during that time. By the way, your name, the Lightheaded crew, your name comes up fairly often in conversation when I'm talking to folk like Versatile, and so it's always interesting again to have conversations with people who are from other areas of the city and see that interconnectedness that I wonder sometimes if the creatives themselves have. So it's just it warms my heart, you know what I mean? To see that. So once again, but by the time I got an opportunity to meet you, you were doing work with Acts 29. What's the genesis of that collective?
Man, it's kind of funny. So I think a lot of times because if something just sparks, once I start on something, I see it through, right? And so I put out my first solo album in '99, and the reality is I should have followed that up in short order. I even was under a record contract with Syntax Records waiting for my next solo record. But I'm connecting at this church, and they were trying to do a mixtape. And their first mixtape, they had like Dre instrumentals where I'm like, no, let's make an actual album. So I'm trying to help the youth group make an album. And it's like I can't help but like bring every resource I have to the table. So Omega comes into town. Me and him we're in a group together called Return to Sender. We're supposed to do that.
Bro, wait, sorry, I just gotta stop you. The stuff that the teensy bit of Return to Sender that I heard, man, I was waiting for the album. I was so waiting for. Anyway, go ahead.
That's and that we made so many songs together, but they were just like recorded in hotels, digital 8-track. There was a label that was supposed to come out that we were connected with, like in Orlando. It never really happened. So when Omega moved to Portland, the plan was let's finish Return to Sender. I get us kind of sidetracked. We do this. We do this Acts 29 record, and then I just turn it into Syntax Records, who I was signed to do a solo record. I'm like, here's a record I finished, and they're like, okay, so they put it out, and then I start getting beats from this dude named Moonshine, and I'm like, Omega, you always have to make the beats. How about you get a rhyme on this? You don't have to make the beats. We start meeting, Tyson, Othello from the Seattle area. I'm like, you should rhyme on it too. And so then we did Lightheaded, and that became kind of that was another detour from, because from 1999, I didn't do another solo record till Shades of Grey 2004.
Yeah.
So kind of we were developing that with Lightheaded. And then once we started doing shows, we traveled so much, doing Lightheaded. We became really, I don't know, we did so many shows together. We had this season where we just had a great chemistry to where to then try and do a solo show, it just wasn't going to capture the same energy,
Yeah.
And so once we did Lightheaded, that kind of took off. But I still would have solo stuff and this desire where it's like if Lightheaded was more of B-boy flavor, I was definitely more of a backpacker flavor. And so I'm kind of mixing in different worlds,
Yeah. Man, Lightheaded, I feel like was such an amazing... What you just described comes across on the record. Like just this connectedness, this chemistry, this energy really comes across on all the records that you guys made. That was I guess it's still the case now when you hear collectives, but was reminiscent of the energy that you'd hear on a Tribe record or the energy you'd hear on a De La record. It just felt so organic and so natural. And maybe I'm biased because I know all three of you guys. But through that Lightheaded process, did you feel like that would just continue to go on for?
In some sense, we did our first two albums. We started a third album, but there's a lot of pieces that come into play, and I think anybody in a group knows this. It's more seasons of life. So I was kind of ahead of the curve with the fellas. I was the first one to get married, then I was the first one to have kids. Tyson was, right at my heels with that. Yeah. And then Milton comes, riding down the pack like 20 years later, like me too. Right. It's like he's older than me, but I got an 18-year-old and he's here with like 2 and 3-year-olds, Anyway, but yeah, so seasons of life get different where your overhead to live as you become an adult, right? Yeah. Your overhead gets higher, and like 3 dudes just hitting the road and doing a show for like CD sales, it stops making sense at some point. At some point it just doesn't make sense, and so I think there's a lot of times in my career, for better or for worse, if I would have just stuck to one thing and focused on it and developed it, it could have matured more. But I was just very like whatever caught me, I would just jump on it, and go for it. And some of that was I did start having responsibilities before a lot of the people that I was running with. And so when I started getting opportunities to do solo shows, things like that, or get advances for a record, I was like, dude, I literally like have to do this. I want to do it, but I also have to do it, and so it's all within that. But man, we had a few opportunities where like we opened for De La Soul, and that was just a huge moment because we were pretty seasoned by the time we did that. And it just felt good. It felt like, okay, like the stuff that inspired us, we're running in the lane with it, at least for a little moment in time.
So then where does Hip Hop and Music come in during that time? Which is the label that you have?
Yeah. So Hip Hop is Music. I think what I saw, this kind of sore thumb existence where, especially being a Christian artist, the primary Christian hip hop record labels, either you had Goatee in Nashville, which did entertain Lightheaded, but they kind of recognized we'd have to change you guys too much for it to make sense. And so we never moved forward with that. Then you had more West Coast kind of, Gospel Gangsters, Grape Tree, label like that in the West Coast. So you really didn't have a Christian label that our music fit on. And then we had no expectation that we would go mainstream. But even within the underground labels, we were just kind of our own thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just Lightheaded. I realized there were a lot of artists like that. A lot of artists like that, where I felt that they had the talent to make really good albums, but they didn't have the resources. And so, especially since I traveled so much, I started cherry picking artists like, yo, you need to make a solo record. You need like some good production. We need to get it mixed and mastered correctly, all of that. And just trying to elevate artists that I felt, in most cases, dudes who were older than me, but had not learned how to navigate the independent system of making your own album and releasing it, And so I would just see things in artists. And so Hip Hop is Music was kind of my, like, underground boom bap hip hop made by Christians, but that is intended to be really good hip hop, right? So the artists are being authentic, and therefore they're communicating their faith, but they're also seeking to authentically make hip hop music. And that was really what that was.
I've been asking this question. I found that I've been asking this question more in the last 3 or 4 years when I've had an opportunity to interview faith-based artists, Christian artists, and it's sort of a thought that I've had. I remember when I heard Brand Nubian, Rakim, who to me is one of the greatest MCs ever, Big Daddy Kane, that there were references in their music that I would hear often, but I never understood. And it took just really having more life experience and meeting more people to understand a lot of the references that they were making, that were based on their belief systems, based on their faith, and how from a fan of hip hop, so much of that was accepted. I should not accepted. That's the wrong word. So much of that was just a part of the fabric of really what I think was one of the greatest eras of hip hop. We think about 5% Nation and this, that, and the third. And I wonder, as a Christian artist, I know how I ask this, because for you, I feel like it's always come across, listening to your music, again, biased because I'm someone who was raised Christian, but it's always something that felt very, like, almost effortless in your rhymes. Very matter of fact, very, I'm not preaching this to you, I'm just talking to you. Like, this is what I believe, this is how I live. No different than any other artist, just tells their story. And I wonder, when you're creating music, and understanding different seasons of life, different times in your life maybe, but did you see yourself as, I'm going to use the word ministering, or were you, I'm making hip hop and I'm telling my story, and the fact that I'm a Christian is just a part of my story?
Yeah, I mean, that's morphed. But I think one thing you're touching on is every artist has a worldview. A lens through which they're communicating.
Right.
I think one of the challenges, and maybe one of the differences is, sometimes a worldview, like religion, it could be something that's like in the background. It even can be reference material, where it's like, okay, I can throw some of this stuff in. And different people, they could dabble in religious language, but maybe not even necessarily practice that religion thoroughly.
Right.
And each artist is going to be a different case, right? And so, in my case, I think one of the challenges is now you're bringing, for me, I wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised in the church at all. So really, hip hop was kind of like the first thing I was really committed to, with that one track mind in terms of identity. I mean, you could say sports a little bit, but it's like we're talking like so young, But like by the time you get to your teen years, and you start having like your own sense of self that's independent of maybe your parents, things like that. And so I'm now really embracing, it's in my dress, it's what I'm spending my time with, it's what I prioritize. And then shortly after that is when I come to know the Lord, And so for me, having a worldview, that didn't seem like a foreign thing. It seemed like whatever was authentic to my life, that's what I should be communicating. And I, maybe from a sense of gullibleness, because you learn over time it's not always the case, but I just always assumed when an artist was expressing something in their music, that those were their real experiences. Right. That was the real lens. Now, sometimes, people will exaggerate or tell stories, and obviously we can use hyperbole, things like that. But nonetheless, I had an aspiration where, in my mind, I always wanted to create from an authentic place. Now, where I think within the Christian, bubble, you have a lot of cliches, things like that just maybe come with different subsets of the culture. And so now the challenge I think that I had was, in order to express my faith well, I need to mature in my faith.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't, it's like when I'm just telling you about my upbringing, I don't need to mature in that because it's just a part of who I am. It's my own origin story, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, I don't need to mature in that. I'm just, as I mature, I've got life to the table. But every time a new facet of my life comes into the picture, I've got to mature in that and begin to understand it well enough that I can communicate about it in creative ways. Because if I don't understand my subject matter, if I don't understand the substance, how can I play with it? How can I be creative with it, right? And I think that can be a challenge for faith-based artists. And so, you fast forward to like the Beautiful Eulogy, and we're pretty much making worship music, right? Very densely theological things. But in order for me to bring the art of rhyming to it, I had to study my content very thoroughly and get to the point where it wasn't just head knowledge, but something that was internalized, experiential. So then I could also emote, express, use imaginative language. You got to be acquainted with your subject matter in order to do that.
Wow. So I had this. There was something I wanted to ask you, but so now I feel like I got to weave because. Well, let me just ask anyway. I was curious about your view, and I don't know if it's going to make sense now based on what you just described. Your view on Christian hip hop 2025 compared to Christian hip hop, late 90s, early 2000s from the creative from the perspective of a creative.
Well, it's a whole other monster, right? And by and large, the music landscape, the process of being an independent, the process of gaining education, learning how to do things, it's at our fingertips. Right. So I'm not really a grumpy old man by any stretch of the imagination. I see a lot of these, artists who are 10, 15 years younger than me, or maybe they put out their first album the same year that I put out my last album, and I see that there is a manner of professionalism and an understanding of the current marketplace and how to navigate it. And so I don't really gripe with that. I think that's really cool. Now, the thing that I was seeking to avoid coming from my era, which is essentially becoming like a youth group rapper, right? That's what I was wanting to avoid because there was a certain kind of playful, can sometimes be considered corny kind of way of going because you're catering to an audience that they are not necessarily hip-hop listeners, right? And so, but now, if you take that same kind of energy, it's like artists have found a way to create music, and they're getting a similar demographic as maybe, an older youth group. I would say like, 13 to 25, right?
Yeah.
This kind of demographic, but they're not going to the youth group. They've got that demographic coming to a music venue, right?
Yeah.
And so it is providing some of those things like clean lyrics, positive environment, things like that, but it's not as boxed in.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of watching that, and I just think in the modern landscape, the artist has more obvious options. I think we've always had options. You don't have to go the way that you go.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can go a different way. But the options are more obvious, where it's like, oh, I could carve a lane, or I could do this, right? So yeah, it's such a different era.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning it. I'm watching like, and I kind of span multiple eras. Like I go back to DAT tapes, where somebody would send me a beat and I couldn't even listen to it until I went to the studio just to get a playback, let alone to transfer it to a CDR so I could take it home, write my song, go back to a studio, right? And so it was very complicated. It was a lot of no automated processes. You know what I mean? I remember, booking shows where I'm literally just going through phone books, looking up venues in areas, cold calling. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's a different era, and so I don't begrudge that at all. I do think that in our modern era, it is hard to avoid the desire to try and get people hype. And it's like, if people are hype, that means there's impact, right? Like if everybody jumps, if everybody shouts, if everybody, and I think the internet is like that too. If something's viral, so if there's a slapstick element or an element of surprise or something like that, and so I think that's always been there, but I think there's a lot of pressure, especially once you do something that kind of pops off, to figure out what's a formula to make this pop off, so how do I create a new song that I could perform in a room of 1,500 people and they all get hype, and that, it's like I'm more from the head nod era, and the listen and take your time to digest, so that kind of like flash response, I think that's the thing that I think is being shaped by the modern landscape in some ways, that I'll be curious how those songs stand up in 10 years. It's like, yeah, that was dope when I was 22 and I was like, do we really want to keep listening to it? I don't know. Maybe we do. My tastes are I'm an odd man out anyway. You know what I mean? I watch the Super Bowl and I'm like, they don't make commercials for me. You know what I mean? Like they're not selling me anything right now. Right. There's no brand I'm gonna, so I've always had more of an underground aesthetic and taste anyway. So I'm not a good gauge, but in terms of the way a lot of artists are moving, I think they're taking advantage of the opportunities that are before them. And there is such a larger pool, of artists, that anybody who's like, there's nothing good out these days, I think you just probably need to work a little harder to find what you're looking for, because it's probably out there, Now, there's always going to be something unique, about certain eras, like, are you just going to, accidentally bump into, Illmatic 2.0, nah, you're probably not, right? Again, there's pros and cons, but there's ways albums were crafted. It was a slower process, the number of hands involved, but, each era has its benefits,
But I think, so a couple of things that you shared are conversations I have with people, specific to hip hop, but also with many different genres of music. That question of 10, 15 years from now, am I still going to want to listen to this song? Have that conversation often, because I think that there's art of all types that are created for the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the creatives think of it that way, but I do think that there is a what's hot right now. How do I get that attention right now? I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox. I think that social media has created this thing for us where how can I get the immediate response, the immediate attention?
Yep.
And we have so many facets now, so many tools now to get that dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has spilled over into the creative process. But I also appreciate what you say, and it's something that I say often as a curator of music. The way that I see it, there is something that still exists that you described when you were younger, when you would go to the record stores and you would dig and you'd find music. That still exists today. So yeah, there's a lot of great music that still exists today. But if you want to find it, you can't just turn on a Spotify playlist. Mm-hmm. You do have to go and look for it. And then it's up to curators like myself who host radio shows and host these platforms to find that, again, not to disparage anybody for what they do, but to find good music and to share it with the audience. That, there's still a lot of great music out there for sure.
The thing I always like to say too is, when we think about music standing the test of time, mm-hmm. we need to realize that in any given genre and in any given decade, mm-hmm. As much as we can list off these certain examples mm-hmm. of records that people are still listening to, we need to remember the majority of the records made in any given genre mm-hmm. and in any given decade, mm-hmm. they disappear with that decade. You know what I mean?
Facts.
So people will be like, oh, I just like 90s hip-hop. Yeah. I'm like, you like 3 albums of 90s hip-hop. You know what I mean?
You ain't lying.
You like Illmatic and 36 Chambers and, Midnight Marauders or something like that, Now, granted, I could sit here and list more, and no, there's a lot, but mm-hmm. man, being somebody who was getting albums around then, I can also list off a bunch of albums that they were within that scene, mm-hmm. And the artists were respected for their skill, but people are not still checking for it today. You know what I mean? And so that's going to be the case in every era. We can look back, 60s rock,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, man, how many one-hit wonders are in the realm of 60s rock, and then how many artists have albums that are still being repressed and reissued, and people are buying them at record stores.
Right.
That's got to be a small percentage of all the music that was produced in the 60s.
You ain't lying, bro. You ain't lying. I want to ask, I want to talk a little bit about then where the idea, the concept of Beautiful Eulogy came from.
Yeah.
Because, I'm going to just keep it 100 with you, bro. I was, again, everything that you were doing as an independent artist, everything that you were doing as a member of Lightheaded, everything that you were doing with Hip Hop is Music. Beautiful Eulogy to me was just like, okay, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. So it starts with, and then this kind of ties into some of the stuff I've been talking about, mm-hmm. is life change set the trajectory for music change. So when I made the album Native Lungs, I felt like I was getting to my boom bap sweet spot, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting closer to being able to make the kind of music I was aiming to make, and so, but then when I toured for that album, I had a lot of life change. I had a marriage that ended. I became a single father, and then I got remarried. We raised our daughter together, had more children, mm-hmm. and so after that album, I'm like, okay, I've got my family now. I know what to do. I book shows or whatever, mm-hmm. and so I do Native Lungs. And I'm doing shows, and I end up, at first I was diagnosed with having stomach ulcers. Mm. And so I'm drinking cabbage juice and stuff, trying to figure out, what is this? Well, eventually my small intestine drops down where it's not supposed to drop, and it's like, oh, this was a hernia, but it's an inguinal hernia if you want to look that up. But this is it's the kind of hernia that if you're a sports player, you don't just get it pushed back in, you're out for the season. Mm-hmm. You may even be out for, you may be out just period, And so I needed the surgery, but I already had a tour booked. And so I go through and I'm doing these shows, and yet like I'm in a lot of physical discomfort. And so by the time I was done with that, I was like, dude, I don't know in this season of life that I want to be running around as a solo artist, just continuing to do what I've already been doing.
Yeah.
And we had started up Humble Beast. And so while I was working on Native Lungs, we had a few moments where I was working with Thomas and Cortland, and we started thinking about, they were going to work on a project. And I'm like, man, if we work on this together, we can travel together instead of by ourselves. And, you know, instead of dividing and conquering, we could like strengthen. And so it was a reinvention where it's like a palate cleanser. If I was going to put out something after Native Lungs that said Braille on it, there was a expectation of what that would sound like. Now there's this new group, Beautiful Eulogy, that I'm a part of, and no one knows what that's supposed to sound like. They may have associations, and so there was a freedom. And within that freedom, we were drawing from, we weren't losing our hip-hop influence as lyricists, but musically, we were drawing from lo-fi before lo-fi was like, now it's like its own thing, right? But back then you had like Flying Lotus, you had a few, so we're drawing from kind of some of the early seeds of lo-fi. For the lo-fi heads, pardon me if I'm butchering that. I know, like, that genre has its own way of tracing, so I don't want to disrespect it, but nonetheless, it was becoming its own sub thing, right? And so we're drawing from that. We're drawing from folk influences. We're drawing from hymns, and some of this was, I was in a season where I was really focused on growing in my relationship with the Lord beyond just my grit. My grit, just trust the Lord and get it done. It's like, man, I want to know the Lord better. And the result of that, of how do I turn that into a song? You listen to a song like the IV, yo, Braille Brizzy in a place like this. I don't want to sound like that when I'm making a song about God being sovereign. Or when I'm, you know what I mean? So I needed a new musical vocabulary to try to express the ideas. Not that the ideas couldn't be expressed through the other style, but my associations with it, because I had expressed other things that way, it's like I wanted to find and develop a new way, And the same way that I found a way to blend with in Lightheaded to kind of find my place, one of my things that I enjoy doing as an artist is I like seeing how to fit puzzle pieces together, right? So how can this combination make something that's unique to this combination? Instead of just my verse is pasted on, your verse is pasted on, and it's like it doesn't feel like it belongs together. I will try and figure out, you're going to chop? I will chop with you. I won't do the same thing that you do. I'm going to find my way to do it, but if Thomas wants to chop, I will chop with him and find my place so that the pieces fit together. We're going to slow it down here. We're going to do this. And so I enjoy that. I find an artistic challenge in that. And then it was just my brothers. And then Beautiful Eulogy took off, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to go backwards now. Right. And so, but yeah, I think it was expanding my vocabulary, and it was figuring out how we, in that season of life, could make the best music that took like everything that each of us brought to the table, instead of just one of us kind of dominating a sound. It's like not one of us could create that music by ourselves. We could only create it together. And I think that's what made it special.
It's funny because you said that, and the thought that came to mind was there seems to be a common theme, right? Okay, I'm going on this. This is my planned trajectory. Oh, nope, making a left turn. Oh, nope, making another turn. And I often, just in conversations with people say that, and this is obviously going to come from my spiritual heritage, that like there's a plan. There's a plan for us.
Totally.
And, we're trying to navigate this life thing. And sometimes the direction that we think we're going, or the direction that we plan to go, is not for you.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, okay, this is the direction, and life takes you that way.
Something I want to add that you just reminded me of too.
Yeah.
I've worded it this way, and I think it's honest. I think when I started making music,
Mm-hmm.
I made it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily. That was my first audience.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful Eulogy, you asked a question about ministry.
Yeah.
While ministry started factoring in,
Mm-hmm.
like I never was under the impression while I was a hip-hop artist, like full time,
Mm-hmm.
that I was somebody's pastor.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
No, I'm an artist.
Yeah.
You know, I can inspire, I can encourage,
Yeah.
I can motivate, but I'm not watching over your soul.
Yeah.
You know, not
Yeah.
like that. But what was happening with Beautiful Eulogy, I was learning not just to make music for myself, but learning to make music for people.
Okay.
So taking my abilities that I had grown in and cultivated and figuring out how can I convey this idea
Mm-hmm.
for the benefit of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really was a transition in my life of not just laboring for my own dreams, my own visions, my own goals, but starting to labor just for the good of others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the seed that started bringing me in the direction of pastoral ministry.
Okay, so that's perfect, because that's my next question, is that transition from being a full-time creative artist, record label owned, like everything that we've talked about, to then being a pastor
Yeah.
of a congregation
Mm-hmm.
on the regular.
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I started learning, I used to, at my concerts, I'd give like a Grammy speech kind of thing at the end of my set.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't touched into some of the old school stuff, like opening for James Brown, some of these kind of
forgot
things,
about
right?
that,
But when I would do that, I would
yes.
give the Grammy speech, I want to give thanks to my personal Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God bless y'all. Good night, right?
Yeah.
And that was fine. I'm not saying somebody can't do that, shouldn't do that, should do something different.
Mm-hmm.
But in this season where I was leaning in,
Mm-hmm.
I was beginning to understand the centrality of the gospel, not just as like the way into the kingdom, but the way you live in the kingdom, And so I'm beginning to, instead of just seeing, I'm trying to be a good person, Jesus saved me, and now I'm just trying to be a good person. It's like, no, the gospel is kind of fueling everything. And so as somebody who, through most of my Christian life, was not really intentionally taught or instructed, I pick up the Bible, I'm like, I don't know how to read this. I don't know how to make sense of it.
Yeah.
I started being taught well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the result of that was, instead of giving my little Grammy speech, I started preaching the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I had to. It was like, it was a compulsion. It was what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd have people come up to me at the end of shows and be like, thank you for making the gospel clear for me.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I haven't heard the gospel that clear in such a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And what that started producing in me, knowing, I know what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like when like the gospel is just preached as like an addendum to the sermon, just in case there's any unbeliever in the room, instead of like something that is like for the believer to fuel their faith and to like propel their obedience, not just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And so I'm like, I understand what they're saying, but what it caused in me is, it didn't make me want to do more concerts. It made me want to be on the ground floor with people that hopefully wouldn't be going to a concert and being like, I ain't heard the gospel clearly.
Yeah.
It's like, no, they could say, yeah, my pastor has taught me the gospel. I understand the gospel. He's made it clear to me. And so I think that's what I started seeing there was this discipleship deficit in my own walk with the Lord for like the first 15 years.
Okay.
And then I saw the difference it made when people actually started teaching me the scriptures, investing into my spiritual well-being. And I was like, that didn't make me want to like be on the road doing shows, it made me want to be a part of a local community where I could invest. And so I started preparing myself for that, not knowing how that would pan out. But it was just like in the congregation I was a part of, any opportunity I had to learn, I became a student.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that I became a student of music, I became a student of learning, understanding the word, understanding how to even put together a sermon or put together a message. And then whenever there was an opportunity, I said yes. And I would just say yes, and I'd burn the midnight oil, whatever I needed to do. And it was just, if this is helpful for other people, Lord, I'm willing to do it. And eventually there was a church in Milwaukee, Oregon. Their pastor passed away, mostly an elderly congregation. And I did some pulpit fill for them. And they said, yeah, will you come and be our pastor? And so me and my wife prayed about it. And then we said yes. And people from our other church came with us. And that's been now going for 7 years.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing story, bro. Listen, we definitely going to have to do a part 2. Because there's so much that we didn't get into and didn't touch on. But that's actually a really good transition into the album.
Yeah.
You've released Handcrafted Raps yesterday.
Yeah, just came out, man.
The reason I say that there's it's a good transition. We're gonna go down the hall and do the radio show in just a minute. We're gonna talk more about this, but what you just said takes me to a song on the album, The Shore.
Yeah.
So you sent me. I had an opportunity to listen to it early before it dropped, and there's definitely some joints on there that I was like, oh yeah, this is dope. I like this, that, and the third. And then I heard The Shore.
Yeah.
I was like, Braille. You said that you had an opportunity to become pastor of this church, and it was, the population was, and I don't know, because the population was senior, and you talk about that, mind you. So I come from a family where I've got cousins and uncles who have been in ministry. It's all I've ever known. I've known them as ministers and pastors and leaders in churches and leaders in conferences and big organizations and this, that, and the third. So I have a perspective on that leadership and what that means and the impact that has on people. Bro, like, you tell stories about being with people on their life journey, at the end of their life journey, in a way that is very clear, very descriptive. You talk about when you would listen to records early and how these songs would paint a picture for you. You're doing that now. Not that you haven't in the past, but you're doing it very specifically in this song. Can you just talk to me about the writing of that song, why you chose, and even like at the beginning of the song, you asked for the creator's help in getting you into this.
Yeah. So the way I made this whole album, bro, I found when we moved to Milwaukee. So I used to live in Southeast Portland. I had a home studio. We moved to Milwaukee, and in our new home, there was no space for a home studio. So I had like my equipment set up in the laundry room, but you got to cut off the AC so the thing's not blowing. Nobody can be doing a load of laundry. Right. You know, it was like the stars had to perfectly align. But I found this studio, Chapel Recordings, in Milwaukee, Oregon, in February of this year. I started just going there on my days off. I'd set aside 2 to 3 tracks, and I would have concepts in my head, but I would go there, and in a 6-hour block, I would write and record, because that's always been my process. I don't really write in my head. I write out loud. So I'll have a beat on loop. So the album, I need it to be done. Like, I need it to be done. I wanted it to come out, in August, and July comes around, and I got every song done except The Shore. And in my mind, The Shore was going to be within the theme of the record, me talking about continuing to do the work God has given me to do until I reach the shore, right? Yeah. So I thought it was going to be more personal, and I start writing, and I scrap these other lines that I had, and I'm like, she was 99. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'm bringing other people's story. And as I start writing that, I write the first verse, and I talk about 2 different sisters one was 99 when she passed, one was 90, that I got to spend significant time with them, you know, basically on their deathbed, you know, and in preparation. And so then I'm like, okay, and then I get to the second verse, and I'm like, okay, now maybe I'll talk about some men, since I just talked about some women. But I start the first line, and I'm like, oh, I'm about to talk about my brother. You know, he was one of my fellow pastors in our congregation, went in for a heart surgery, and October of last year passed away. He never recovered after that heart surgery. And so when I'm saying help me get this one out was when I wrote that second verse, I was writing it on the spot in the studio, did not plan to be writing about that. And I've just got tears streaming down my face. And I'm like, dude, I got to record this song now, you know, and I got to go back to the first verse because I've now written the whole song. I got to rap about all these people. And, you know, and I'm like, dude, you know, so that was just like me saying that, and I just kept it. I ended up doing a take. I had the beat playing out loud. I start recording. I didn't even mute the monitors because I was just so in the moment. And then I recorded that take, and I was like, dude, I can't do it again. I'm not going to get another take that's going to. And so even in the recording, if you listen to my vocals and solo, you hear the music like playing in the room. But yeah, so it was just a moment, man, and I didn't know if I would ever feel freedom or permission, you know, because music has always been something where I express from my real life. I think the more my life became intertwined with other people's lives, I'm like, I don't always feel permission to just be talking about everything I'm thinking and everything I'm feeling because it pertains to real relationships with people, and I need to process that with them more so than venting on a record. And so it was interesting for this to come out, and I'm like, okay, I can honor other people. I can share my experience in the relationship with them, and I can do it with a clear conscience, you know. So that was a very unique experience that I hope the Lord like begins opening more, where I'm able to honor people, tell how their story has intersected with mine and how that's impacted my life, but in a way that other people can relate who have been in similar scenarios, or it prepares them for a scenario they haven't been in, but now they begin picturing it and like, oh, okay, you know.
So dope, man. Such a dope way to end the project. And just such a great song, man. I think I hit you on text, I was like, man, that's a dope song, but that's heavy, bro. And going back to listen to it again and again, it's really cool. And I hope that those who knew those individuals and their families feel that what you just described, that it is an honor to the lives that they lived and you know, the footsteps that they've left as they've now, you know, gone to sleep. Chopping up with Braille, bro, man, we gotta head down the hall, man. There's so much more I wanna talk about, but before we finish this interview, I just really want to encourage people to go check out the project. You have consistently done something, which is you've created an opportunity to support what you do in a very real, tangible way, man. When you release records, you know, you if I'm not mistaken, there's CDs of Handcrafted Raps available.
CDs and vinyl, man. I started doing the calculations, bro, and it's like for the amount that it costs, if you buy a CD, for me to make the same amount, you'd have to stream the album 420 times. And I'm trying to think about the number of albums that I've listened to 420 times start to finish. I don't know if there's any albums on that list, bro. So, you know, I'm not anti-streaming, but, you know, just to recover costs to really like go in and make a record, I've been trying to find a rhythm of like, man, if I just can push like 100 CDs, 200 vinyl, get some cost recovery, get some profit margin, that's just going to make it so that I can be more expedient in continuing to create, you know, because with my other I love creating, I'll create anyway, but I can do it more effectively, more efficiently if I actually am, setting it up in such a way where there's cost recovery for making the records. And so I'm kind of trying to bring physical media into the play. I know I'm not the only one doing it. There's, people like Alchemists who really excel at that.
Yeah.
But kind of watching that, I'm like, okay, I think it's a smaller market, but finding an audience that really believes in the music, benefits from the music, and would, be kind of hyped to own something that's limited and curated. So,
No doubt. So how do people do it?
GospelBanquet.com. Or if you just find me on social media, I'm always, Brian Braille, BryanBraille. I'm always, there's links in bio and all that kind of stuff too. But Gospel Banquet is kind of the headquarters for physical stuff.
That's what's up, man. I should. We gotta go. I just have to hit purchase on my order. Because I definitely want to get the autograph joints.
Bro, this is whack. I meant to bring you a record, and then because of the tire situation I had, I got distracted and I didn't. But that was my plan. I was like, I'm bringing Klyph a record, and yeah.
Nah, man, I definitely want to support the movement. Also, man, we got to go real quick. Kept Safe collection.
Yeah, best of. This was. I did that. I did the 20th anniversary of Shades, and I did the Kept Safe because coming out of Beautiful Eulogy, once again, I feel like I needed a palate cleanser. I needed to reacquaint myself and others with what I was doing pre-Beautiful Eulogy, because me and Beautiful Eulogy, those are my brothers. We're on good terms, but we're not going to make another album right now. Right. For the people pining for that, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be a solo artist, like it or not. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. Yeah. And so I had to remind myself, what did I used to make, distill my own catalog, find what's the essence of it, and then go from there and be like, now how can I reimagine that in this season of life? And so Kept Safe collection was like, man, God's kept me through a lot. I just listened to the records. I'm like, oh yeah, that. And to put together the collection and kind of distill my back catalog as kind of a launch pad into building. I call this my third wave. Basically, this is my third era. And I'm hopeful, should the Lord keep me around, that this is the start of a prolific era again for me, and so I wanted to reacquaint myself with where I came from, but then I wanted to also lay a foundation, and I was testing the waters, printing the vinyls and stuff. I'm like, am I just in an echo chamber? Is anybody interested at all? Is there any glimmer of hope that I could get this thing back off the ground? And there's enough there that I'm like, okay, I think this could still happen. And now I'm just having fun, but it's I needed the self-understanding. I needed to figure out what is my model going to be. Because I would make songs at random and then put them out on streaming. I'm like, dude, I'm not even going to recoup off the one song. Yeah. And so I had to really figure out, how am I going to approach this in this era? Yeah.
That's what's up, man. Bro, I have, once again, man, just been a fan for a long time. Appreciate you. Consistently, anytime I've ever reached out, you always hit me back. Definitely appreciate you spending all this time with me today. Man, I'm so happy for what you've been able to do. God bless you for following the path that has been laid out for you and the impact that you've had on so many people. I'm happy to see you back, feeling driven to record again, man. Just, man, appreciate you, bro. For real.
Thank you. Likewise, bro.
Yeah, man.
It's good to reconnect.
Word.
And your gentle, kind disposition, man, has always been an encouragement to me.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. Braille, man, if you guys want to hear continued conversation, we're about to go down and do an episode of Welcome to the Neighborhood, so be sure to tap into the WTTN Guests Revisited if you missed a live broadcast. Well, of course, by the time you hear this, you will have missed a live broadcast. So go check out WTTN Guests Revisited, the Braille episode, man. Thank you so much for everybody who subscribes to the podcast. Remember, you can check it out everywhere you listen to podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, like everywhere you listen to podcasts, or at klyphnotes.com. Big ups to X-Ray FM for being generous hosts of this recording of the Klyph Notes podcast. And last but never ever least, big ups to the homie Theory Has It for creating the official theme song for the Klyph Notes podcast. Until we have an opportunity to do this again, y'all be blessed. Peace.
Peace.